In the winter of 1850, a massive storm battered the remote Orkney Islands off the northern coast of Scotland. For 2 days, hurricane winds ripped across the Bay of Skaill, tearing away the thick grass and earth from a high coastal dune. When the storm finally broke, the local laird walked out onto the beach to inspect the damage. But what he found protruding from the scoured mud was not wreckage from the sea. It was the roofless outline of a stone settlement, emerging from the earth like a ghost. A subterranean village, completely intact, that no local record had ever mentioned. Inside these deeply buried houses, the heavy stone beds were still perfectly arranged, as if the families had just awoken. The stone dressers still stood against the walls. Bone tools and carved bowls were left on the floors, exactly where they had been dropped. The settlement predated the Great Pyramids of Egypt by centuries. But the people who built it, the people who lived inside these perfect windproof rooms, had vanished. The community had sealed their doors from the outside, walked out into the freezing northern landscape, and left their entire world behind in the sand. The morning after the winds died down, William Watt returned to the Bay of Skaill with a crew of local men. The immense coastal dune had been sheared open by the tide. What looked like a collapsed wall was actually the top of a vast structure. They began to dig down through the wet earth. For weeks, they hauled away tons of heavy clay and packed sand. Slowly, a single enclosed room was carved out of the hillside. It was built entirely of stacked flagstone. There was no timber supporting the walls. There was no iron or bronze used in the joints. In this harsh, treeless landscape, the builders had used purer stone to shape every detail of their lives. They built heavy slab beds, recessed hearths, and thick shelving units designed to outlast the weather. Watt initially believed he had found the ruins of an isolated medieval outpost. But as the men scraped the mud from the floor, they realized the settlement was far older than written history. The polished bone tools and carved stone axes scattered in the dirt did not belong to the Middle Ages. They belonged to a world before metal was even known. And Watt had not just uncovered a single house. He had opened a sealed stone corridor leading deep into the dark. Over the next 70 years, archaeologists slowly cleared the sand from the rest of the site. They found 8 separate houses, grouped tightly together, but they were not built on top of the ground. The builders had sunk their homes deep into thick layers of domestic waste, a mixture of ash, shell, and bone known as midden. This dense packing acted as a perfect layer of insulation, trapping the heat of the hearth fires and blocking out the freezing northern winds. Inside the rooms, the layout was exactly the same. A square stone hearth in the center, a large flagstone bed on the right, a smaller one on the left, and standing against the back wall, directly facing the doorway, a heavy stone dresser. It was designed to be the first thing anyone saw when they crawled through the low entrance, a display of status in a world made entirely of rock. But the true genius of Skara Brae wasn't just in the rooms themselves. It was how they were connected. Every house was linked by a network of narrow stone-roofed passageways. Once the winter storms rolled in off the sea, a villager could leave their hearth, walk to a neighbor's house, and never step out into the open air. They had built a completely enclosed subterranean world. But a sealed fortress is only useful if you have the resources to survive inside it. They were completely cut off from the forests and flint mines of the mainland. They survived on what the ocean and the harsh coastal pasture provided. The central hearths were filled with the charred remains of sheep and the shells of thousands of limpets. Without metal or strong timber, they carved everything they needed, from cattle bone and washed-up driftwood. In over 600 years of occupation, the compacted earth shows no evidence of weaponry. There are no signs of fortification against other tribes. There is no layer of burning or conflict. They were entirely alone, on the cold edge of the world. Generation after generation lived in the exact same circular rooms, sleeping in the exact same stone beds. But deep in the archaeological record, the rhythm of peaceful survival abruptly breaks. The uppermost layers of the packed earth reveal a sudden shift in behavior. It was a single moment, frozen in the dirt, that ended 6 centuries of routine. When the excavators finally reached the lowest layers of the floor, the timeline of peaceful isolation abruptly ended. Across the threshold of a low doorway lay the scattered remains of a bone necklace. The cord had snapped, sending dozens of tiny, polished beads rolling across the stone. They were never retrieved. Beside them, the village's most valuable tools were left resting on the heavy dressers. A community intending to return does not abandon its means of survival, but the final detail of their departure lay at the entrances to the houses. Heavy stone slabs, some weighing hundreds of pounds, had been wedged into the narrow passageways. They were not placed there to keep the wind out. They were jammed into the frames from the outside, sealing the empty rooms behind them in the dark. For decades, historians assumed a catastrophic sandstorm must have buried the village in a single night. But modern archaeology tells a different story. The layer of sand that filled the passageways, drifting through the abandoned doorways over months and years. The departure was sudden, but it was deliberate. Perhaps the climate shifted, making the harsh Orkney winters unsurvivable. Perhaps the societal structure collapsed. Whatever the reason, the families sealed their homes to protect them, intending to return when the weather broke. They never did. The fine coastal sand eventually swallowed the entire settlement. It packed the rooms so tightly that it preserved them in time. Today, the sea is slowly eroding the coastline at the Bay of Skaill. The heavy stone dressers still sit exactly where they were built 5,000 years ago. The hearths remain cold. The stone beds remain empty. We know how they built this impossible subterranean world. But the people who mastered this harsh edge of the earth, the families who dropped their tools and walked away, remain lost to the wind.